American Express Platinum?
No, I have, no.
Is
I
it just how many
have-
miles you have, or is it your credit card?
Yeah, we have Silver.
Recording in progress.
We mostly fly Delta.
Because I think they cross that over like longer. Aren't they keeping that? Yeah.
Yeah, it's from like 2019. It's still
That's
carrying
funny.
over.
We'll turn to collect, we're starting in collections, so
Amy, can you hear us?
it's fine.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep. I really needed a Dr. Pepper. Why aren't you here?
Because Sherry said that I can do it by Zoom, and so you'll just have to like get two Dr. Peppers next time.
Awesome. All right. So, welcome to the work session, everybody. Let's see. You want to redo the home occupation ordinance, huh?
Yeah.
Since
At our last meeting, we talked about wanting to look at it. And so I went through it and I made a few comments on things that I see as problematic. There's Amy, do I need to email this to you?
Yeah, because I haven't seen that.
I could hold it up for you.
I mean, you're really far away.
For a minute, I had forgot that you weren't coming, and that's why I hadn't. There's copies here on the desk for you.
Well, I mean, you don't have to email it to me. Then I just won't, know what you're looking at. So it's okay. Either one.
I just sent it to you. So there's some, as I went through this and made comments on it, my biggest concern as I looked at it is that there is a lot of things that is really difficult to actually enforce. I mean, in theory, the regulation is good, but unless Dan is going to sit in front of somebody's house with a stopwatch, it's hard to enforce some of the things. So, I mean, my overall thing is, with the exception of saying, okay, we don't want anything that, it's easier to say, okay, you're not allowed to do A, B, C, and D. Like, you're not allowed to do anything related to vehicle repair or sales or engines. It's easier to make a list and then say, except for these exceptions, except for these things that specifically are not allowed, as long as you meet all these other conditions, it doesn't matter what you're doing. I mean, overall, that's easier to do rather than saying, well, these are some of the things that we think might work. But yeah, as far as, I mean, just going through a little bit at a time. And even then under 6404, under the section on use, under 3, number 1, we say the following uses shall not constitute home occupations and shall not be allowed. Any activity that noticeably produces electrical interference, smoke, dust, odors, or heat. Well, we've got that, but then we make provisions to do engine repair and things like that are usually going to be the businesses that create the most, like odors and heat and stuff like that. So there's some conflicts there. And even the next one, any activity that during a 30-day consecutive period deals with the storage or disposal of harsh chemicals, how is that going to be enforced? Unless somebody's going and checking every day to see if the business is dealing with that. Like, how would we propose to enforce that? Number
Dan could get down in the sewer system and check it out, make sure they're not disposing of anything.
yeah.
Take samples.
I would recommend. Oh, this is another one that I don't know how we're going to enforce. Retail sales of goods produced off premise, including short-term boutiques or group garage sales of personally used items held more than once every 3 months. Do we require people to register that they're having a garage sale?
I think that's just to catch the ones that are habitual, that are. Because in Ogden, there's some that are nonstop garage sales at houses. They got their little temporary tents out front, and they just put tarps on them at night, and the next day they're open again, and every day they're open.
It's just a
like-
junk
Oh, okay.
collector.
Okay, that makes a little more sense on that one then.
There's a couple in Roy that are like that.
I would actually,
Those would be easy to catch.
yeah. I would actually encourage the commission to consider not allowing anything related to engines as home occupation. Just because, I think we saw a situation last week where it's like, well, what about a motorcycle engine or an ATV engine or a car engine? Like I think the nature of engine repair, whether it's large or small, is not conducive to neighborhoods.
In any zone, you think?
Except as a home occupation, I don't think it should be allowed.
Not
If-
even in your agriculture where we've got multiple acres? I just think,
Well,
don't
the
you get
problem
some
you have, Natalie,
pushback
is-
from people?
But you're in an agricultural zone,
I know.
and if we allowed an agricultural zone, then we can't deny what's going on in your neighborhood. Unless
Well-
we go back and rezone that.
Well,
Right.
except for that, that's
Residential.
not what we approved in the first place. We
Right.
approved part-time use. That's
Right,
different.
and I don't think they should in agricultural zones because we've got ag zones that are, for all intents and purposes, not actually ag.
Yeah.
Correct, right.
Unless you change the zoning, I don't know that that's even wise to put it in any zone until that's changed.
That might make some people up in arms.
The
but
only
I see-
time that I would be okay with that as a home occupation is if on top of the zoning, you set a minimum lot size of like 5 acres.
Yep.
It can't, in that case, if you want to allow it, it shouldn't be done by the zone because the zoning in a lot of areas is a little bit problematic on that kind of thing.
And I know what you mean, because we do have some of those farmers that have other people bring their tractors and stuff, and
That's
they
what
do
I'm talking about,
repairs.
something that has, somebody has a lot of land.
It's gotta be on a
Yeah.
minimum lot size for that to
Okay.
work, honestly.
Yeah, I would set a minimum lot size probably of no less than 2 acres, but probably at
Right.
least 5.
Because your neighbor would have 2 acres, they could set up quite an automobile repair place right next to you, right?
Who's that?
Your neighbor just to the west, isn't that 2 acres there? It's not?
It's 2 parcels, 1 acre each.
Right, but the same person owns it.
Yeah, but it's different parcels, so.
Oh, okay.
They'd have to combine it.
Yeah,
Didn't realize it wasn't purchased as one piece.
No, there's two, whatever, tax ID numbers. I don't know
okay.
what-
I
Is
didn't
that
know
what
that.
they're called?
Yeah.
Yeah, they pay property tax on both.
yeah, tax ID numbers.
I just think we have a guy that we take our car to that's in West Haven that, his property looks immaculate. I can't imagine him not being able to do that. Just seems, he's probably on an acre. I was just sitting here trying to think how big his lot is, but it's got a great big garage and,
And we have a guy that winterizes our boat, so is that?
yeah.
I'm just sitting there thinking, like,
that's what I'm
I
sitting
don't
here
want to
thinking,
cut off
like,
our arm to
that's,
spite our own, like,
that's,
I don't know, I'm thinking,
seems pretty restrictive, but
what's that? Oh, no, if we take our boat to someone else that winterizes, like, twice a year, they unwinterize and winterize, so.
That's not really engine
That,
repair, though.
is that not automotive or engine?
Start the engine?
It's loud. I think that's a lot louder than
I
someone
don't know how
working
to
in their
winterize
garage.
a boat. I've no idea.
Well-
And you can't do that indoor.
Yeah.
You have to use it outdoor with a hose, like you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but she's paying somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying, yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like there's inclusions. There's places where I think it works, and I hate to, but I think in the middle of a neighborhood, yeah, probably not.
Well, but
Honestly,
see, that's the problem. That's, I think, how we felt
yeah.
a year ago.
We
is that
debated
This
this.
was a situation that we could allow, and it's gotten out of control. But that isn't where it started. So that's the issue.
I think as a home occupation, engine-related businesses should not be allowed because they do tend to get out of control. You have a good idea for what it can be, and then
It doesn't go along with country living, just saying.
I think it kind of does in a sense.
Tractor repair.
But I
does.
was thinking
The
too.
thing that we're seeing,
Saying, disallowing it doesn't go along with country
Yeah,
living.
I think you're right.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think that's what people are gonna say.
But like if they're on a frontage somewhere where there's buffer, they're not. I don't know. I just feel like there's areas of the city, but then those areas are probably going to change and get more
yeah.
dense. So
well, one thing to note, ever since COVID and people have started thinking of other ways to gain income, especially if they're working from home, we've seen, and Cherise can back this up, we've seen an uptick in home occupations where people they're leaving their jobs at an office and coming home and doing things at home. And I mean, there's tax incentives for that, right? If you're operating out of your house, you can write off a portion of your house as your business. There's lots of incentives, and a lot of people are getting creative that way. So we see a lot more coming back into the homes and not necessarily going back into the offices. So as we look at this, we kind of got to look at this through new eyes, that there are people that are saying, hey, I can use my house as my occupation. So what can I do, right? And so that's why you see people that are asking us for these kind of people that want to make guns in their houses, who want to, do welding and cutting and all the stuff that we still allow. But automotive is one of those things. If somebody's a mechanic and he says it's allowed, I'm going to see if I can do it at my house. So we have to just think that we're in this new era of home occupations, that people are getting really creative. You've got one coming to you tonight that's getting really creative with, I don't now have to have a storefront. I can operate that out of my house. So
Did you find anything on ours that's operating full-time?
I need to look at it more. There's a couple other, moving past the engine thing for a minute, there's some other things in here that are a little bit problematic. The requirement that non-resident employee must park on the property and not on the street. Unless you're gonna require their employee to register their license plate with the city, you can't tell people they can't park on a public street. It's unless they park and don't move it for more than 3 days at a time or something like that, which is a whole separate thing. We can't tell people they can't park on a public street.
Why can't we if that's part of his condition?
It's a public street. You can't block access to a public.
Well, but we can tell them, we can make them have enough space on their lot to have space. for
Right.
them.
You can require additional off-street parking, but you can't mandate that people related coming there for the business, whether it's an employee or a client. You can require the provision of extra off-street parking, but again, unless somebody's going to sit there and watch the business, how would you enforce where somebody parks? And unless there's already no parking on one side or both sides of the street, and that's usually because of the width, you can't, it's difficult to say you're not allowed to park there. Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking that
Public
they can't
streets have to be
employees if it's a
open.
home occupation. Like,
One, can't they?
so they're meeting there and like my son goes to the plumber, he works at the plumber, and then they all meet there and then, okay.
They go on the trucks, because they park the trucks on our property.
Right. So the crew all comes and then they leave in the crew truck. Gotcha. Okay, because I was sitting there thinking.
I can't hear Dan. Sorry, Dan.
It's all right. My dogs are tired.
You can come up and sit in Andrew's spot for a while.
Or Amy's.
Oh,
No.
yeah.
You guys are privileged. Just kidding. So I was commenting, Amy, that I've only had the one complaint in regards to employees parking on the street. And so as we look at this expectation, it's difficult for me to enforce. We've got hundreds of home occupations, and it would take a long time to go around and just make sure that happens. And I don't have that accessibility to look up plates to find out and verify either way. So, so that would be hard to enforce, like Sherry has outlined.
Well, and Amy, because it's a publicly dedicated right of way, we can't really pick and choose who gets to park there, right?
Well, sure you can.
That's true, but I think the point that you made earlier about the we can require them to have off-street parking. I think that fixes the issue.
Yeah, similar to with if somebody has an ADU or wants to have an ADU, you require them to provide additional off-street parking. You can require the same thing, but actually enforcing that somebody can't park on the street, we don't get to pick and choose who parks on a publicly dedicated road.
I was just telling Scott, if there was a habitual offender, we could paint the curb white or put a sign up. If you tell them that, hey, we're going to do this if you keep doing this, and otherwise we're going to paint your curb red.
Unless there's no curb.
I think you have to have a demonstrated safety concern to
fine.
paint the curb red, don't you, Amy?
Well,
Yeah.
on the one complaint that we had, there was an issue because they were parking on both sides of the street, and it was 4 cars deep on both sides across from each other. Yeah, huge issue for line of sight. So that was an easy one to go and say, hey, for a line of sight issue, and then right now it's currently part of the code of the ordinance. You need to get them on your property, and the fix was not good because now they park on this grass. So, but it's not on the street. I have noticed that there are a couple on the street now that unless I'm called to that, as far as that violation, I don't enforce it.
So I have a question about, I understand, like wanting to limit the home occupations. But if with the increasing number of people who are teleworking and working from home, do we need to, should we look at qualifying that statement a little bit more? Like no more than one, like, home occupation that has clients physically come there? Because, you know, we've got on the agenda tonight, there's one coming for a second one at the home. Neither one of the businesses have clients come to the house. So that's why I would maybe, as you guys go over this and think about it between now and the next work session, I would maybe think about that if we want to qualify that a little bit more. Because really, is it really problematic at all if, you know, one of the people there has a landscaping business and one of them has a house cleaning business and nobody ever comes to their house? I mean, I can see why we would want to limit it to one if there's clients, like if somebody has an in-home salon, that there's a lot of people there or something like that.
Yeah.
Um,
What happens if husband and wife are both CPAs and they have separate companies and they have clients come to each of them?
well, and that's what I mean. Like if they
That's
have,
more, yeah.
and then there's another thing too. Like I've seen cities that basically, I've seen cities that require, like if you're an engineer or something like that and you work from home, but you work for somebody else, I've seen cities still require you to have a home occupation. But I've also seen cities that if you're working at home as an employee of somebody else, you don't have to.
Yeah. Well, wouldn't a school teacher bringing home stuff to grade fall into the same category?
That never happens. Teachers have enough time to get everything done during the day, right?
They work 16-hour days.
Yeah, so I would give that some thought about ways, because I understand the purpose behind it, but kind of like Dan said earlier, there's some things we maybe need to look at a little differently because there are some changing dynamics.
Now, didn't the legislature do something about home occupations? Mm-hmm. So,
18, 16, 17? Yeah, back in 17 it said, essentially what it says is if it doesn't have a significant impact to the neighborhood, which would mean clientele that come to the house. So if it is that engineer that just works at home and he takes, everything's electronic, the city cannot require him to have a license.
yeah.
We've had several that have come in for that. Some want it because they want to show people that they are licensed in the city, but we can't mandate it. When they call or even they apply, we tell them, okay, state law says we can't mandate you have a license. Do you still want to have one? Yes. If not, you're not required, and we even refunded some money. So if the guideline that I use is if it doesn't have a significant impact. Now, know that there are probably people that have an unlicensed home occupation in their house that could come and ask for a second one, but it's technically not a second one because we don't show them with a license at that house. So something else to wrap your head around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just a couple other things to think about before we go over to the conditional use. I have a similar question to selling parties as I had about something else. But maybe I understand it a little bit better now that you talk about the people that do this kind of thing every day. But really, I don't understand how it's different than if people have like a big family party or if they have big groups of friends over every weekend. Like, I don't understand how this is different.
I would agree with you on that one. I've had plenty of those parties that were more than 10. I didn't know I
Yeah.
was supposed to get permission.
Don't let it happen again.
I don't do it so much anymore. When I was younger and had less money, I did. That's what
Well, this ordinance
you get
wasn't
free
in effect
product.
then.
Yeah.
But that's not their business. The person who's doing it usually isn't the one whose business it is.
We did have those one ladies that came in and they were gonna have it at their house. Doing
The
selling
painting
party.
one? The
Yeah,
painting one?
something like
Yeah,
that.
this I'm reading it thinking more like your Pampered Chef, your Tupperware parties, your
Yeah, and
Osborne Books, your
my thing is I don't understand how this would be, like I said, any different than somebody that has a family party, like has their kids over every Sunday for church.
I would
Not
think
for
this would
church, for
just
dinner.
apply to someone doing it at their house constantly. You know what I mean? So you have a neighbor that has those parties all the time.
people don't have that many friends.
No, they don't. But,
Constantly.
guess that's.
Come that many
I'm
times.
guessing that's what we were thinking at the time when we did.
Yeah.
If we get rid of the engine part, we can maybe just get rid of the whole thing. Really? Isn't that kind of majority of what it seems to be?
I think truthfully, not that I've been lying up to this point, but truthfully, like to be totally honest, I think you make a list of things that aren't allowed. I think you make a list of standards, like if like regarding clients, regarding like hours of operation, things like that, and then let it go. And you have the same set of standards for everything. You remove the engine related businesses. You just set the rules, and then Dan deals with it if they're in violation of it. But some of this stuff, there's no reasonable way to enforce it.
Can you put that a home occupation can be a home occupation, but it's gotta be done Monday through Friday from 7 AM to, you know, more like a regular business, then you can't.
For the record, Dan says no.
Well, Dan doesn't, legislative did.
Yeah, so we have a guy around our corner, and I'm just sitting there thinking of different people now that are coming to mind. He does small engine repair, KT Repair up on 3500. Fixes everybody's lawnmowers and just small engines, snow blowers. I mean, to me, that's a valuable contribution to the community. So,
I almost think that you,
what's that?
I almost think that you allow some of that stuff. I mean, because small engines and that type of stuff aren't a big deal. I think it's when you're dealing with
Automotive.
anything that deals with automotive.
But then
like
you have to
automobile.
define where
But-
that line is.
And I get it, but like if you go in and say there's no, like the two instances we have, right? The both of them are dealers. No, there shouldn't be any dealer anything in a residential area. I mean,
Yeah,
there
I
should
say
be
we not
there
have
should
any
be a
dealers.
way that we can define that that still allows the guy that wants to fix his snow blowers, right? I mean, those guys. Half of those guys are probably retired and just doing it as a side gig to make some extra jingle change in their pocket. And so I don't see why you're going to penalize somebody like that versus when we're trying to shut down like the guys that have come in previously that are running a dealership basically out of their house. You know, they're taking
Right.
cars, flipping them. And, you know, I'm against a mechanic shop in a residential area anyways, period. But you know, we've allowed a couple of them in, and
Right.
and some of them have no complaints, and others it causes all the issues.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like everybody says, one egg ruins a whole basket. One bad egg ruins everything, and it ruins it for everybody. So
Well, do you regulate it by the horsepower or CC of the engine? Because small engine repair typically isn't a motorcycle.
but then again,
Or
you know, you'd have
Four
to
wheelers, it's
you'd have to know how. I mean, are you going to penalize the guy that's? I don't know. Yeah, I see where you're going.
I wonder if our attitude should be, we just say no. But the guys that don't cause any problems with their neighbors, we ignore them until there's a problem. You know what I mean? It's no. We do not allow it. But
But we turn a blind eye to the good guys. Is that
Yeah.
okay, Amy? Is that gonna work? That'll work, right?
Well, the situation we have that then starts complaining and turning in all the good guys.
Yeah.
That's what happened there.
Yep. When,
Yep,
yep.
he
Somebody
said,
gets mad and he
"No,
goes
wait a
around and
minute,
turns
he's
it on.
got to live by him though. You can't complain about somebody that lives a mile away from you.
There was a guy
was.
around the corner.
I know, but that's what our attitude should be.
Oh.
You should be only able to complain about somebody in your neighborhood.
Well, I don't know that Dan can take that position though. I mean, someone complains, you have to look into it, right?
I think that we can look at doing two different things, and I think we can come back with two different drafts. One that includes some enforceable regulations on engine repair, and one that leaves them out. And then you guys can look at both and look at them on their merits and see what you think about them.
I would prefer that because I'm still torn between just the line between country living and being urban. And
Yeah.
we're trying to be both right now,
Yeah,
and that doesn't work.
yeah.
Well,
And I don't know, I guess maybe there comes a time when you just cross the line, like this is what we're gonna do and this is what we've decided. And that's maybe what we need to decide if now's the time.
kind of an interesting argument. If you go into a central Utah rural community and you find garages on people's properties. I mean, that's what the guy does for a living and he's allowed on his property. So You know, rural doesn't necessarily mean free of that kind of a business. So,
We're just straddling the sprawl. The
Yeah.
sprawl is
but there's,
like,
there's only
problem
200
is-
people
is-
that complain in the whole town, and all
Ultimately,
200
the
will go
problem
to him
is,
to get it repaired.
people
so.
don't care about their neighbors and anything about what's going on in the in their neighborhood,
Right.
right? They're
those
focused
people
about themselves,
for everyone else.
and you know, then they make it miserable for everybody else. So
So I've lived by two. One that didn't cause a speck of problems to his neighbors.
I think it's one that's just kind of ruined it for everybody and soured us. But I don't know. I hate to like just say zero, none. But what if can we just like cut the dealership part out of it? Because that would cause, I mean, that makes it, doesn't that make kind of a bigger, cut out the bigger?
Well, I mean, you've already cut out the dealership part of it. Nobody can have a dealership in any home occupation period, so that's already out currently. The engine repair is the big deal. I mean, whether it be car, motorcycle, anything else, that's the big deal. Even boats, I wouldn't want a guy cranking a boat,
It's
repairing it
loud.
in my backyard. Yeah, it's loud. Because that prop is not in the water anymore.
Well, that'd violate the noise ordinance, wouldn't it?
If it's consistent enough, and if I can get there quick enough,
Right.
and if they're
You can
not,
catch him.
if they're not wanting to catch me on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday when most people are doing that,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of food for thought.
Okay, let's set
Moving
this
on.
aside.
So
and
do you
look
want
at
to
the
work
commi-
out
Yeah.
businesses that are okay and,
Yeah, well, I'll come back to you with a
because
couple
it would be
different-
really good to have businesses that are just okay and they don't ever have to come here.
Well, they
Staff
really,
can just
they're
say-
not, they shouldn't have to come unless they're getting a second, unless we leave the thing and it says no second one without permission of the planning commission.
Right.
Home occupation should never come before you guys anyways.
holy cow, that was a bad cough.
The dog thought that was funny too.
Yeah, he wasn't liking that.
Oh, I thought that was
good
you.
timing.
That was you.
Oh, hey, Amy, I thought about you, not to change the subject, but did you hear about the lawsuit with the peacocks attacking kids at the zoo?
No.
Yep, there's a lawsuit. The child wasn't really injured, but it was emotionally traumatized.
Oh, of course.
So they're suing Hogle Zoo because the free-ranging peacocks traumatized her child. So anyway,
Traumatized.
I would have been traumatized.
just remember, people were kind of
I'm
upset that we
traumatized
wouldn't
just
let
hearing about
free-range
it.
peacocks in West Haven. So sorry, it just came to mind. Sorry to
Free
interrupt.
range peacock sounds like the name of a really weird band.
It's a punk rock band
Or one
from
okay.
Canada.
Let's talk about conditional uses.
Okay.
So this is another one where there's some things that are really difficult to enforce. I fundamentally don't have a problem if you want to require a public hearing. We need to set some metrics for when that's going to be required. Right now, the language of saying if it's deemed in the public interest, that's pretty subjective. I think there are probably certain businesses that you can say, okay, if it meets the following criteria, it's going to trigger a public hearing. If it's like a project over 3 acres in size, if it's in a manufacturing zone, if it's within 500 feet, if it's a commercial use within 500 feet of a residential zone, stuff like that. I think because anytime we get into stuff where you're saying things like deemed in the public interest, you run the risk of being arbitrary.
Yeah, it's vague, yeah.
So I would suggest that we consider
I
some
don't think we've ever
metrics.
redone this one.
Huh?
I don't think we've ever redone this ordinance.
So, and I mean, again, this is just my thoughts as I.
Is it this us or would the city council do this?
What do you mean?
A conditional use ordinance, because is it land use? I mean,
It's land use. It's in the zoning code.
okay.
So there's some general things we do need to look at it and make sure that some of the things, some of the questions blend with what we just did with the site plan, because there are some site plans, it's like a square and a rectangle. Not every conditional use will require a site plan approval. Wait, no. It's not a square rectangle situation. Sometimes things will require site plan and conditional use, but not always. But for those instances that do, we need to look at this and make sure that it gels with the site plan.
Sometimes, you know, the commercial, you talked about having a public hearing with commercial. Most of the time, no one shows up. But then you have those times when people get all up in arms about something that's allowed in that commercial zone. So it's like
Yeah.
all riled up for nothing, since conditional use, you know, just means it's permitted with conditions, so.
Right. And that's another thing. Like there's some this one I did tweak a little bit of the language on. Like it's conditional uses are allowed unless the detrimental impacts can be reasonably mitigated.
Right.
It's very, very hard to deny conditional uses. There are actually cities that have moved away from or are in the process of getting rid of conditional uses and instead just having a really comprehensive set of site development standards. Because cities have run into a lot of problems with conditional uses. I mean, and this is another thing, like if we look at 3506 under conditional use standards, B, site design, the use is well suited to the character of the site. What does well suited mean? I mean, we already determined.
What's the character of the site?
Yeah. And that's another, needing to completely revise and simplify the land uses we have in the city. We've already determined that certain uses are well suited for certain sites by nature of the zoning code, by nature of the allowed things in the land use matrix. Things like circulation, parking, even refuse collection, those are somewhat governed. Access, circulation, and parking. Those are already governed by the city engineering standards. So similar to what we did with site plan and design review. Again, just it's easier to reference it back to, does it comply with West Haven City engineering design standards and specifications?
Maybe just take those out and put that, just say, must comply with
Yeah.
West Haven's design standards
Yeah.
and engineering standards.
Utility services, anytime somebody does a site plan as part of the site design, as part of the civil documents for the engineering of it, if it's a new site plan, they have to provide will serve letters.
Yeah.
So that is something that's more or less already covered. If it's already in place, like if it's an existing building that somebody's changing the use of from something that's permitted to something that's conditional, that is something that we can say, okay, if it's something that's increasing the intensity of the use, then we need to have them go to whatever the utility services are and say, even though this building's already in place, the increased intensity of use, there's enough capacity to continue to provide those services. The same thing with K, with public services. The signs, it's governed by the city sign ordinance.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of a concern about section 3510 amendment. A conditional use permit may be amended subject to the original approval procedure, but we don't have any we don't have any standards. Same thing with periodic review. So amendment, periodic review. We need to, if amendment is going to be like the business owner driven, then we probably need to make that clear that said, if a conditional use permit holder wants to amend it, they need to follow the same procedure. Because this makes it sound like we can go in and amend somebody's.
Oh, yeah.
Would this apply to when like that Fizz changed its outside design, or would that be something else?
That'd be site plan.
Just the site plan.
It'd be like if somebody were to get a conditional use permit, like for Fizz, but then something changed and they wanted to do like Little Caesars instead, that's drive-through only. Like it would. That's probably what would need to change, because we would need to look and see if there's different traffic levels. We would need to look at stuff like that. Or if they want to take what was a spa, like a nail place, and convert it into a clothing store, that kind of thing.
We had one, that insurance car place behind Flying J. Remember that? They came in to expand their business, and it was under a conditional use, so.
Yeah.
They brought their attorney with them and said, state law said you have to allow it because we're just expanding it, and something to that effect, I remember. Remember that, Kurt?
I can't remember that one.
Yeah.
You dreamt that one.
No, I didn't dream it. Yeah. We made him put up a solid fence.
That was the AIA.
Yeah.
If I missed that meeting.
That was before our time, I think,
Yeah.
Was it? It was a long time ago.
before my time.
He and I came at the same time.
Yes, we
You
did.
must have been sleeping that day.
Maybe I was just gone. It was parent-teacher
Has
conference.
the securities
Conference.
have been
Another
parent
thing
teacher
about
conference.
transferring the permit, I think we need to clarify transferred to another owner, because if they take a conditional use permit and move properties, the other property, there may be site problems that need to be looked at. And also, it's my understanding, Amy, that conditional uses run with the land, and would probably need to put in something in here on if they're not used within a certain amount of time, then they expire. But don't they run with the land unless we set something specific on them expiring?
Yeah, I believe so, but don't we have something in there about that if it changes ownership, that they have to come back in and see us? I can't remember if it's that one or if it's the home occupation.
That's the home occupation.
Well,
Hey,
we've had
I know
businesses do-
somebody that we could ask about it tomorrow. Oh, I actually may ask him if I have time. Oh, so, and then on 35, 13, and 14, we need to set, I think we can combine those. We can't just randomly pull a conditional use in if they're operating as they were meant to operate.
The only time we've done it is if they aren't in compliance.
Yeah. And that I fully support. If somebody's operating outside of their conditional use permit terms, I fully support bringing them in and talking to them. I think we can combine 13 and 14. Actually get rid of 13 and then just change 14 to review and revocation, and then say any of the following shall be grounds for review and revocation of a conditional use permit. And then have those as your standards. So those are my basic thoughts on that. I don't know. Like I said, I know I didn't get these to you guys for you guys to have significant comments on. I did that intentionally. I just kind of wanted to lay them out and let you guys know like what my thoughts are and give you guys my comments so you can take them back and look at them. I'd like to discuss it, if it's okay with Mr. Chairman, I'd like to discuss these drafts again at the next meeting. And then if you would all come like with some additional thoughts on it so that I can have some good direction on where we want to go on changes with these at the next meeting on the 14th, then we can proceed from there after we've had that conversation to draft revised ordinances.
Oh, here's the expiration, the very last section. If it hasn't been used for a year, it's gone.
Yeah.
Except it says we have to give them written notice that it's expired.
That's on
Right.
home occupation, isn't it?
No,
That's on conditional use.
conditional use right here. That seems like, shouldn't it just expire on its own without having to give notice?
When what?
When someone's like abandoned a business or property or something, of course, the conditional use will expire
Yeah.
after a
Well,
year.
except for what if they had, and then a year and 2 weeks later, they decided to start it up again? Then
Well,
you need to notify them that they're no longer allowed to do so.
well, I guess, but it says that it shall be given, so that means they have to.
You think about
There's different things that you can do on how to handle it. You can say that they run with the land. You can say that I think you just have to state what's going to happen. You can say that on transfer of ownership, but even that, if the person buying the property buys all of the assets and liabilities, then that could likely be included in there.
Right.
You can talk about abandonment. You can say, if they write a letter to the city requesting that it no longer be there.
Well, I'm just saying the burden on the city here is that the city's got to keep track of everything that's up and running. And if it's
Yeah.
been a year, then, the city's got to hurry and write a letter. You know what I mean? It just seems like,
even that one's a little bit tricky.
yeah, I just
but-
say,
when we look at the Bauer, I call it the Bauer project over by Flying J, we've had, a business go out of business, didn't renew his license, and then come back and decided he wants to do it again. Does that require us to come back in for new conditions,
yeah.
right? Because we've got now an expired license, which should expire to the conditions. Then he comes back and he wants to start a shop up a year later. He needs new conditions.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
we take a 5-minute break.
Yep. Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll start our